As promised, get the more Sixers conversation now. The Shams report is out. Well, what does it all mean? Kevin McCormick, Sixers writer over at 97.3 ESPN.com and also over at Sports Illustrated, joins us now on 97.3 ESPN. Kevin, how you doing today?
Josh, I'm doing good. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. And listen, I have been saying that, there's been a lot of speculation, a lot of rumor, a lot of suggestiveness when it comes to the Simmons stuff. But now you got what Shams said on Friday. He expands on it in his article today at The Athletic. This Simmons leaving Philadelphia stuff now has way more weight and legs than it ever has had before, in my opinion. What is your reaction initially to what Shams reported?
I wouldn't say it gained any more serious traction. Obviously, when someone to the caliber of Shams is bringing it up, I agree in the sense of it gains a little more weight. In terms of the information that was brought out, it was kind of more of the same. So I would more agree with what you were saying before you brought me on, in the sense of it adds to the reports that we've seen all offseason of these multiple teams being interested. He name-dropped Minnesota again, who has been arguably the biggest team all offseason to be linked to Simmons. I think throughout this whole pursuit, kind of just reading the entire landscape of the information that's been brought about, that Minnesota has been the most aggressive, but the roadblock has been Daryl Morey's asking price and what Minnesota has to offer. So I agree. It feels like Minnesota is kind of the front runner to try and land them, but only in the sense of if a third team can get involved.
Yeah, we're not confirming that he's going to Minnesota, but it's the fact that Minnesota has been rumored so much that they've stayed in the conversation. It has to make you think that something is swirling, something is going on for Shams to come out there and say what he said, because part of what he also said, Kevin, is the fact that he asked the question, do the Sixers make the deal or do they let him come to camp? We saw Harden come to camp last year and how much of a debacle that is. Do the Sixers really want the Harden fiasco in Philadelphia this year?
I think you do. I recently wrote a piece for SI about how Daryl Morey has been right in this whole situation of remaining patient. I think practicing patience will get you the best return. I think if Daryl Morey went with the trade early on in the offseason, nobody would have really liked the return. I think if we're sitting here weeks away from training camp and Ben Simmons was turned into Malcolm Brogdon and picks, people might have liked it in the moment, but now in hindsight, might not be as big a fan on the trade. The James Harden connection, while I think the situations might not be perfect, I don't see Simmons throwing a similar rant that we saw from Harden as he was kind of forcing his way out. Weirdly enough, through all of this, if you look at the verbiage that's been used in the Simmons situation and compare it to other situations, it's always words like Simmons is open to a trade and, would be willing to move, but it never says that he wants it or demands it. So I feel like while these reports have come out that the situation isn't great, and while I agree it might be awkward in the beginning after an offseason full of rumors and Daryl Morey actively trying to trade Simmons, that, once the wheels kind of get turning and this core is back together, that the situation can at least be tenable until a trade is found.
Do you think that I'm just asking, just scenario-wise, what if Lillard doesn't come available? What if another player like Beal doesn't come available? Do the Sixers just keep waiting for another disgruntled guy to maybe come along then?
So here's the thing. When you look at Simmons' aspect on the Sixers last year, the issues come in the postseason. Throughout the regular season, the Sixers were phenomenal. They've been a 50-win team pretty much every year since Simmons has stepped on the floor with them. Granted, most people might cite Joel Embiid's dominance and, rise to the upper echelon of NBA superstardom to be the key factor of the Sixers finishing first in the East. But Ben Simmons also played his part in that. He is still an all-world defender. He is still among one of the best facilitators. So, like I said, practicing patience is the thing. If you have to carry this all the way to the trade deadline, like I said, it might be awkward in the beginning, but I think when this team gets rolling and these pieces still work together in a regular season setting, maybe you do have to wait all the way to the trade deadline and reassess as you gear up for your postseason push.
Kevin McCormick joining us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers writer over at 97.3 ESPN.com and over at Sports Illustrated at Kevin MCC NBA for all of his Sixers and NBA coverage. Kevin, with all that being said, one person we've not heard from throughout any of this is Simmons or anyone from his camp. There have been no responses, no anything except for videos of him working out, which we get every summer. So what is your perspective on how Simmons and his camp, their position to just be completely silent on all this has been?
I think it's smart just from the leverage aspect. I think if they truly do want a deal done, him, running around and being disgruntled doesn't necessarily help that situation. I think it more gives the Sixers leverage of, we might be trying to trade this all-star player, but he's not disgruntled in any sense of the way. And I think that's why we're seeing more reports now of the Sixers telling teams that they're willing to bring Simmons back in to start the season. Because like I said, it's a leverage thing, and the Sixers have one chance to get this right. So if Rich Paul and Ben Simmons do want to change the scenery out of Philadelphia, they're playing their cards right and kind of keeping the leverage on the Sixers side to get that trade done.
Kevin, I mentioned before the break that, sometimes you might not get the first thing you ask for, right? The Sixers are the car dealership. They're asking for a certain number, and maybe these teams are not willing to pay that number. Is there potentially a middle ground? Do you think there could be something that's saying, hey, we didn't get Damian Lillard, but we got maybe the next best thing down that would be worthwhile for the Sixers? Could that trade potentially be out there? Because we know, as Shams reports, and as you and I talked about multiple times, you're probably going to need a third team involved. So this might not be about the Timberwolves giving you what you want. It might be another team getting involved who maybe they want what the Timberwolves have in terms of assets.
Yeah, I think that middle ground can be there, and I think it's just taken a little longer to get there than some might expect. We saw all the rumors early on in the offseason of Daryl Morey throwing out these ridiculous trade offers, and I think that was more to combat the lesser trade offers that were, being called to the Sixers in the beginning. Because you have to remember, all these teams, these organizations that are potentially in the mix for Simmons, the last time they saw him on the court was Game 7 against Atlanta. So there's still that bad taste in teams' mouths while still trying to acquire him, while they know that his entire situation isn't like that. That's still the last thing that their eyes have seen in terms of him playing. So I think Daryl Morey throwing out these ridiculous offers was more to try and meet in the middle and, hey, we'll come down from this ridiculous offer and still come away with something suitable. It might not be a superstar talent in any sense, but if you can get a third team involved and there is a situation where the Sixers move on from Ben Simmons and still move the needle for them and become closer to contending for a championship, I think that is that middle ground that people will be more than suitable with.
We just mentioned Morey's name a couple times here. How important is that Daryl Morey is the man pulling this trigger and it's not somebody else in your mind?
I think it plays a huge factor. His track record speaks for himself. Look at the way he traded for James Harden, the way he acquired Chris Paul. This is a guy who, kind of makes deals appear when they're not necessarily there. He's being known as a star hunter, and that's something that the Sixers need now as they're trying to pair another star with Joel Embiid as he enters his prime season. So I think having Daryl Morey running the show is, a big advantage in the Sixers' end of this.
How also big is it the fact that we know that Shams said in his article, all signs are pointing this coming to an end? Does that make it a little bit more, maybe not specifically time-wise, but finality-wise, that this is coming?
I think so. But then again, if you look around from all these reports, that's kind of been the verbiage of it, that it's not necessarily an if anymore. In the early weeks of the offseason when they were first eliminated from the postseason, if was thrown around a lot. But as these talks continued on and on, it felt like it did shift to a when. You also have to think about the fact that Daryl Morey almost traded Ben Simmons for James Harden as well. So I think playing that into this now as well in terms of, talking with teams all offseason, even though there's reports that things might have stalled now, I'm still in the camp that it's still a when, not an if. And I agree that Shams taking the time to put that little note in there definitely does give it a little more weight.
I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like a lot of people were insinuating and suggesting that the Simmons-Harden thing was real, but we never really had concrete, reporting until now about it, about the details. We all knew that, hey, Daryl Morey wanted Harden. We all knew that. That wasn't some rocket science. But Shams coming out and saying, oh, by the way, it was Simmons, Thibault, and 2 first-round picks. Kind of whoa, wait a minute. That's a little more detail than I was expecting here, buddy.
Not to mention, how does Houston turn that down when you're looking at what they got in return?
Right?
They
Like,
turned down Ben Simmons, Matisse Thybulle, and granted, the Sixers' first-round picks aren't of extreme value, but it's still 2 first-round picks, in the 20s, as opposed to what they have Kelly Olynyk now. Like,
well, Olynyk became a free agent, right? He's not even there anymore.
Did he sign somewhere else?
I'm gonna double check, but I thought he bailed on them.
Even worse, nothing that Houston walked away with in terms of that deal. They tried to bank on taking on Victor Oladipo, hoping that they could flip him for more value, but essentially got him for nothing. So you turn down Ben Simmons, who's entering his prime years and is under contract for 4 seasons, Matisse Thybulle, who just made an all-defensive team while playing only 20 minutes a night, and a pair of first-round picks for nothing. Like, if I'm Houston,
by the way, it literally is nothing, because I have the Pistons. Detroit Pistons announced signing of free agents Kelly Olynyk and Trey Lyles. So, first of all, Jared Allen was the guy I thought was going to go to Houston. He ends up in Cleveland. So, really, the team that won the trade at the end of the day was Cleveland. It wasn't even Houston.
No, and you also need to account for the fact that Indiana got Karis LeVert for, the shell of Victor Oladipo. It's crazy that Houston traded away the former MVP, the superstar, and looks like they're the team that got fleeced now, 8 months? It hasn't even been a year later.
It's absolutely horrible. And that's why, you have to wonder when it comes to Daryl Morey, how much is he sitting back and being like, hey, man, I used to be in Houston. I made trades, got something out of it. I'm not going to be them. I'm not going to sit here and try to walk away with nothing. And I think that's part of the reason why you have to also think that he is keeping the churner going, because of the fact that he knows there are teams interested. Teams want Simmons. It's just a matter of saying, look, I'm not going to be the Rockets. And if I'm, it's almost like the scene from Draft Day where, Kevin Costner says, and I want David Putney. Like, there's a point in time where it's like, I want all my picks back. I want David Putney. Give me what I want. Stop messing around with me.
Yeah, Daryl has never been in the mind frame of just trading him for the sake of getting it done. He's not going to do a move unless it makes sense. The Sixers feel their title window is now. They need assets and players that are going to help them win now. The issue is, with some of the teams that have been linked in these rumors, they are also trying to win now. So it's kind of against the grain of these typical situations where, a team's trading away a superstar in sense of phasing towards a rebuild, like similar to Houston was with James Harden. So I think that they need that third team that's going to get involved. But listen, a team is going to get antsy, and that's why Daryl Morey has to remain patient. Some of these GMs, they are pressured by their owners. They're like a team like Minnesota, who is looking to get back in the postseason. I think that's why they've been so aggressive to getting towards Simmons. They think he is the piece that gets him there. The team is going to get antsy. They're going to end up overpaying, and Daryl Morey will hopefully, in the end, get that suitable return for Ben Simmons. Kevin,
30 seconds to go. How surprising are you? Is it that it's August 30th and we're still chatting about all of this? Does that surprise you at all, the timing of this?
I think it is pretty surprising, especially now in the player empowerment era of the NBA. Usually these deals, appear and happen pretty fast. So I will say it's pretty crazy that we're a little over 3 weeks away from training camp and Ben Simmons is still in the Sixers uniform.
He's Kevin McCormick, Sixers writer for 97.3 ESPN.com and Sports Illustrated, at Kevin MCC NBA on Twitter. And he joined us right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Kevin, appreciate you jumping on today. Great insights, and we'll catch up soon.
Sounds good, Josh. Have a good one.